G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic weekend. Now as always we do have a lot to talk about. We're going to look over the maps and see where those movements are currently occurring, but we're going to overlay this as well with defensive works, and that may give us a better idea of where the resistance may be felt, but where Russia may be pushing as well to try and negate some of that resistance and approaching defensive works from maybe a more beneficial axis for where their offensive campaign is sitting. We're going to look at strikes and some more information about the F-16 crash that we saw as well. And then I want to talk about international criminal courts and Putin's visit to Mongolia. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Belt and Road Initiative and, between China, Mongolia and Russia, and see where not only the influence is, but where the interest for this is as well. So we do have a lot to go over. We're going to look on Google Earth, go down on some positions and where high and low ground is, and a bit of everything as well. But I did actually forget a part of the video yesterday, and this was in regards to the deep state telegram of the Azov commander speaking about the lessons the Germans learnt against the Soviets and the Allied forces, and those lessons learned, of course, that led to Germany's ultimate defeat, but those lessons learned throughout the war and mistakes that were being made as well. So the first one I want to talk about that we actually looked at quickly yesterday, but was the Germans' obsession of Stalingrad, a town of limited but some strategic value, but ultimately the obsession to capture a city just bearing Stalin's name for a political victory or embarrassment. And as we know from lessons we have learnt in attritional, protracted warfare, positional warfare, that regardless of the political consequences, fighting on disadvantageous terrain burns up units, losing experienced soldiers who are key to victory. And secondly, I wanted to speak of this part from the perspective of a German prisoner of war, from planning on protracted war as well, and attritional warfare, large-scale warfare. Now, he was a captive in Normandy from US forces. And speaking of this, he confided to the American captors that he understood the true reasons for his unit's defeat, saying, "You simply piled up the supplies and let them fall on us." Also stating here that troop mobilisation rates and levels are also critical components of competitiveness in a protracted war. And some of these lessons we're learning as we go from this modern protracted attritional war, we get an idea of where some things may be sitting. But just some things that I did forget to talk about yesterday. So let's look at some strikes and then we'll look at the maps as well. So there has been strikes into Belgorod, of course, back into Russia from Ukraine, and we are seeing some buildings on fire here, said to be multiple casualties. There are videos as well of those casualties. As well, then we've seen the Russian pages are claiming in retaliation for this, 3 to 4 is what I'm seeing, but I'm not 100% sure on that number. In Kharkiv, there has been FABs launched into Kharkiv or dropped from aircraft, causing damage and civilian and casualties here as well. So this back and forth between Kharkiv and Belgorod here, of course, where we speak of what Putin wanted to create of that buffer zone and the stalled out offensive that launched in these directions as well. But let's talk then about Zelensky's decision to dismiss the commander of the Air Force, saying, "I am immensely grateful to all our military pilots, engineers, warriors, and mobile firing groups, air defense units, all those who really fight for Ukraine for the result, the same for the command level. We must strengthen ourselves, we take care of our people, and take care of our warriors," but replacing the commander of the Air Force. Now, this comes after that F-16 crash that then killed the pilot, Moonfish. And what I will say on this is there must have been some error here, either in the air defense or the plane, because why would the commander of the Air Force lose his position and be replaced if it was just a pure accident in the plane or something that is unavoidable in war? So there has been some sort of error that has occurred, has made this then crash occur. This wouldn't happen if it was just one of those events that happens in war as well. Many have speculated that it may have been air defense. Now, I want to look over this as well, sent from one of my friends who speaks French, so easily to work out some of these French videos and translates for me as well. Henry Chouet, former Rafale pilot and instructor, he's also a YouTuber, goes over the possible causes of the loss of the Ukrainian F-16. He thinks several are plausible, but believes friendly fire to be most likely. To his credit, he warned a long time ago that if Ukraine intended to use those aircraft for defence against missiles, losing a few to friendly fire was likely. He explains that to intercept a drone or cruise missile, you'd most likely follow it first, meaning you'd have roughly the same trajectory and speed as the missile itself, significantly increasing the odds of mistake by air defence operators. He adds that because of the low altitude, you might also be out of range of radio communications, hindering coordination efforts. So according to that, is likely that we've seen that dismissal of the commander as well. So it potentially is something like this. Apparently it's going to be a fully open investigation. We're going to get a better idea. We'll see. Also saying, by the way, you said Alexei Mess, so Moonfish, had at least 1 year of training. That is likely true for the F-16 specifically, but in 2022, he was already in command of a whole squadron of MiG-29s. That means he had many years of training and practical experience, including combat missions. I also can't help noticing that along with Juice, he was the most famous Ukrainian pilot due to their lobbying efforts aimed at securing F-16s for Ukraine. Of course, we've seen many photos of Juice, who had lost his life, and Moonfish, who had lost his life, together with officials as well in the US and lobbying as well. And now both are dead. It could be a statistical anomaly that both of the most famous pilots are dead, but it does make me wonder about Ukraine's current supply of experienced pilots. So that is interesting to think about as well, that of course Ukraine still needs guys on MiG-29s. You still need some to convert over to the F-16s, that transition may be difficult, and what is the amount of experienced pilots still that are currently combat capable or in training, or that may have been lost to this war as well. So let me know what you think of this. So let's look at a couple of strikes and a new FAB. So of course here is the map of Ukraine, with, of course, with the capital of Kyiv in the center. This is Russia out around here. The red area is occupied since 22, the purple since 2014, and the green or blue new territory in Kursk that Ukraine has taken and occupied. Some of these should be green as it's over 2 weeks, but the green anywhere else, or blue, green is over 2 weeks that has been liberated, and the blue is under 2 weeks. So we'll come down here into the New York front, Toretsk here, and we do have some footage released from Russian pages of aerial bombs targeting a number of these high-rise buildings in here as well. You can see the amount of destruction in this thermal of multiple of these buildings, both coming on fire from these large bombs being dropped. Now, this is the FAB that we, of course, are very, very familiar with, that is causing a lot of chaos on the front line, and I think is, along with some other systems, but is causing a lot of the reason for the advancements we have seen, as the price to almost like the P&E ratio, but like the price to explosive ratio is very, very good for these to smash through defensive lines as well. But Fighter Bomber has said that there's a new variant of this. The Modernized UMPK now looks like this. It has been further refined, improved, and now it flies even further. So we knew 30, 40 Ks. Of course, this depends on everything from wings to altitude, to altitude, to the speed, to the bomb itself, from 250 kilos to 3,000 kilos. Now it flies further. The vast majority of tactical missiles with the same accuracy and much more powerful warhead. We know some of these were developed, of course, with a little like missile jet engine on the back of them as well. So to my eye, of course, we're comparing apples and sort of oranges here, but it does look like these wings have been further extended that are larger. I'm thinking that these are spring loaded, so when it drops, they then pop out like we have seen, say 30 to 60 feet below, we see them then pop out, as well as a much, much larger tail section here of these two vertical stabilizers, and the overall section looks to be a lot larger to my eye as well. But I may be incorrect on that, but said to still be improving those systems. Again, those systems to hit the bombs in the air is not ideal. You really need to be striking those Su-34s, but the further and further they're back, the less and less time that they're actually going to be in range of air defense and air-to-air or surface-to-air missiles too. So let's then have a look at the maps. Now, where I will start is then up in the north. Now, again, this map from yesterday to today showing no changes. Noel reports this map is not showing any changes here either. Now, what Noel reports does say about this is the Kursk border operations day 25, that the momentum has passed. An overview of events happening and other border regions in his daily thread. Less fighting is reported from both sides. That doesn't mean nothing is happening, but Ukraine is also digging in and preparing for a longer stay. Now, this is something that Ukraine will have to do. If they want to stay and occupy this area, they have to dig in to maintain those positions. My questions is with this is digging in and stalling that front, holding that, trying to stabilise it, may actually be in Russia's advantage. From what we have seen in the war, Russia has the major advantage on an attritional, just grinding front line due to just the numerical advantage of men, of artillery, of aircraft, as well as, I believe, a command decision to be able to absorb much larger losses as well, if that then makes sense. But of course, winter is coming, and not only winter freezing the ground, but also you get a very, very wet period as well, which the logistics is going to be much more difficult crossing the border into these areas as well. So that'll be interesting to see if Ukraine do plan to stay and hold and dig into these areas, or could we see a reallocation of the forces here out to try and stabilise other areas like Pokrovsk? But like we have spoken about yesterday in the warfare doctrine and how people are seeing the war in Ukraine, that they say Ukraine needs to have simultaneous and successive operation without pause. So you have to push somewhere. You're not going to win this war or win back large amounts of ground with one finite 2025 offensive or one big offensive. It's not going to happen either way with the amount of a coordination of elements, either Ukrainian or Russian, but you're going to have these simultaneous and successive operations. You're going to have one here and then another one going on and another one, maybe pushing the same area and multiple areas of the front line to cause then a cascade effect. Of course, this has to be done without pause. Like we've seen the 2023 counteroffensive, now that it's been massive pause since then, 18 months, any gains that had been achieved there have either been turned around or the amount of fortifications have been redug, that's not going to have much effect, if any, on new operations. So this has to be successive and simultaneous as well. The problem with this is the reliability and this timeliness of aid to Ukraine does from the Western states can be a problem for actually maintaining any sort of tempo as well. Ukraine is sort of pushing shit uphill in many regards. Now, as well, I saw this talking about the other day. We looked at some numbers. Zelensky claimed that Pokrovsk had not increased in speed due to Kursk, and I showed some numbers that said different, and I've seen many other graphs saying the same thing. So let's bring this up in here so you can see both graphs and I then disappear. But this is in French as well. Since you were discussing Zelensky's press conference on the issue of Russian progress since the Kursk offensive was launched, Maquette Escoret has actually plotted this using this guy's mapping. The top right plot, so this one with the dots, shows cumulative Russian gains in square kilometres since the 5th of October 23. And the bottom right plot shows the daily gains in square kilometres as well, smoothed over 7 days. And what you can see here is a definite increase in when the Kursk offensive was launched. So there has definitely been an increase in speed due to this. Now, we have spoken that this doesn't mean correlation, doesn't mean causation. And I said from the outgo of this, one of Russia's tactics against this may not be to then redeploy forces into then stabilize this. It may be to try and almost reverse the bait and go, right, we're actually going to push even harder here to try and cause you to abandon that, to come down as well. So it may not be because the forces have moved, it may be because Russia's pushing harder, or it may be a mix of both, if that makes sense. But let's have a look then at the deep state map and see where things are changing. And as you can see on this map, there was a major advancement south today, pushing through Kalinivkia, the rest of Kalinove, and broadening this from Memrik as well here. Now, this is the only change seen here, as well as a tiny sliver up here, but let's not take that into account. It's basically nothing. It may just be a correction. So this is further pushing down here and securing more areas. Now, let's have a look at Noel Reports' map here. Again, these can be a little bit difficult to line up, but as you can see on his map, it is showing very, very similar, but I believe maybe even a little bit further south, but all in all, very similar in this front and the continuation of that push, not only towards Pokrovsk, but south as well. So then let's zoom out just a little touch and line up Suryak map. Now, Suryak has updated his map, but he hasn't actually released like the screenshots of it. And you can't go day to day to see the changes on his map. So I'll update you tomorrow with that, but we will use the map today. Now, this does show some very interesting differences on these maps. So this Halitsinivka down here, Suryak is showing that the majority of this, if not all of it, has actually come under Russian control from Memrik out. So he's showing a significantly further southerly push outside of even the grey zone. If we line up where this dog leg in the road is here, he's showing significantly different. Now, as well, a lot of claims from a lot of pages about Russian presence inside or halfway through Seladove as well, out from Memrik and Nikolaevka. And as you can see, Suryak is also showing that push as well. He's showing that Marinivkia right here has come under control. And then let's have a further push up in here too. So we will see in this Zurakovka here, this is this dot that he's showing that these three towns in here have basically come, at least the first two have come under control as well. And he's also showing, at least from this map, and we can't zoom in and really get down on it, but he's showing that Hrovka as well in here, that has come under a lot of control as well. We can see where this major T intersection is in here, and it's showing out beyond that. Then we look at these two reservoirs just to the north, and he's showing a push out in here too. So again, he's showing significantly different amounts of ground made in here, but we do know there's definitely been southern advancement. The rest of it, well, we'll take it on notice and we'll wait and see where that is moving. But this is getting closer and closer to be knocking on, and these are the outer suburbs here somewhere, to be knocking on Pokrovsk doorstep, 8 kilometers. And one of the issues in here is going to be the FABs that can support this operation and can start dismantling those defensive works. And there has been questions raised about the amount of defensive works and the ongoing development of those fortifications for the Ukrainian side in this war as well. And what is there to step back to? Is it being done methodically to wear down the Russians, or is it in desperation moving back to underdeveloped positions as well? This is what we did see in Avdiivka, and I do hope that the defensive positions out here have been built up more than the first defensive line that fell around Avdiivka, and then the second around Berdachi, and then the third down Prohez, and further back, as we'll show you then on the fortifications map as well. So Suryak has said there's going to be a lot of updates. Give it a day, and I'll give you all of those from him. So then what I want to jump onto is then the scribble maps. This is then showing those fortifications. And what I want to say is many people are saying that Pokrovsk is an objective, but not the initial objective. The initial objective is to shorten this line from Ugledar through to the south of this Pokrovsk front that we are seeing. And we are seeing Russia push very hard to try and bypass and envelop Ugledar itself, as they have failed to get a foothold inside Ugledar well now into 18 months. And the idea, what we see, does tend to be somewhat supported if we look onto the fortifications map. Now, again, this map is not showing the amount of changes that something like Suryak will show, but you can see from Avdiivka through the defensive lines that have not held in these spots, and where Pokrovsk is, there's still a lot of build-up of defensive works, but it does thin out then past here. But what many are pointing at is if Russia do try a southerly push from here, so have a look at where Memrik is. This is Memrik. Then there's a lot of open ground, in here that isn't that heavily defended. Now, this won't have everything on it, but just major ones. But at least down to this Hernik, a lot of these positions are going to be more developed for a westerly push coming east to west from the Russian forces just heading due west. That a lot of these may not be as effective as some of the other ones, although will still be somewhat effective. Now, what others have pointed at is even further down from here, a lot of these works around areas like Andriivka make use of the high ground here to push on then a due south offensive, and that is what they are protecting from. So if Russia do come out and then head south, that is what they're protecting from rather than some of these. So these would be very useful in this scenario. But what people are pointing at is, well, no, that's what the Ugledar front is, that the Ugledar is going to push due north in here and sort of pincer this, the southerly push down from Pokrovsk front, as well as a hard northerly push from Ugledar as well. Now, this is much, much larger scale over a number of months, if even doable, given the amount of forces and time available before the ground freezes, gets super muddy for mechanized movements as well. But let's just have a look. So as you can see, in and somewhere like Andriivka, Shevchenko, down in here, we know Kursk and the front here, these, to my eye, are built for a southerly advancement on to protect somewhere like Andriivka, as of course it's on the north side of it, and just the layout of this, of your first firing positions and then positions in depth here too. And if we jump then onto Google Earth, and this is Andriivka here, we get a better idea of why this might be. So we have Andriivka, and we can see, of course, Google Maps never truly shows great terrain, or Google Earth, but if we take in where this road is sitting along the outskirts here, you can see that this road is basically on the top of the high ground here, that a lot of the in-depth positions are back behind this in some dead ground, but the more frontal positions are on high ground to protect. So, of course, protecting from a southerly advancement, so pushing straight down on these areas around Andriivka, rather than if there was a pure north push. What many are saying Russia is trying to do is trying to meet this up somewhere and make the best advantage of the defensive works that are going to be there regardless. And if they can secure this to get then in behind the defensive works that sit basically from this front through to Zap Oblast as well, then using the Dnipro River as a major obstacle in the way, then further shutting that off. But what that would do for Russia is then gaining the majority, or more of the majority, of the oblasts that it wishes to hold, of course, that it released in then its peace plan back to Ukraine when Ukraine was in Switzerland, that they want to maintain the oblasts and the four oblasts, and of course then Crimea as well. Of course, they don't occupy 100% of any other than Crimea, but if you could push through to Zap in Dnipro River as a natural border, you're going to have more of that, especially if you can get in behind that defensive work as well. Again, this isn't anything that can happen in a day, long term, if then possible at all. Many are saying that Ukraine, and these are Russian pages saying, that Ukraine's going to have a much harder push somewhere, whether by boat or by other means, into Kherson, as well as some of the forces from here may have been moved up into Kursk, due to the intensity of fighting here is much lower than in other areas in the south or east too. So wait out, I guess, on this. So let's move then up into the Pishani front up in the northeast here, and we can see a further push down south. We saw a push yesterday in this area, and then further then today, and it does appear along with this other push out to the west here that Russia is trying at this Berestov area to try, if we just look on the axis that these are pushing, trying to have some sort of envelopment and close up this area. Now, what we assume in here, and we have been assuming for a while, that Russia is trying to get to the waterway running through here, and then you can split this into the north and south area, and that will create logistical problems up into areas like Sinkivka, of course, where Russia want to capture the hub here of Kupiansk, but again, much longer term if possible, grinding long-term pushes through here. And we do have then a Noel Reports map out of Pishani, Berestov, so it's actually slightly named incorrectly here, but you can see that the amount of ground made in this same general area as here, so 100%, we know there has been an amount of ground then made in here. So what I want to talk about is the ICC, the International Criminal Court, the warrant out for Putin, and Putin now going to an ICC country. Now, if Putin, with the warrants out, goes to a sign that is signed, ratified, Rome Statute, ICC, then they have an obligation to arrest him, hand him over. Will that happen? Look, I don't think Putin would be going to Mongolia if that were to actually happen. Now, Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has then released this. Putin's planned visit to Mongolia at the invitation of President of Mongolia, who would like to make the following statement. The Ukrainian side hopes the government of Mongolia is aware of the fact that Vladimir Putin is a war criminal. The ICC, in jurisdiction of which is recognised by Mongolia, has issued a warrant for his arrest on suspicion of illegal forced transfer of Ukrainian children to the Russian Federation. We call on Mongolian authorities to execute the binding international arrest warrant and transfer Putin to the ICC court in Hague, or the ICC in Hague, not court. Now, this is the first country that Putin himself is visiting that has signed and ratified the statute, and by that they do have an obligation to then uphold this. But like I have said, the arrest warrants out have really come into the spotlight of their credibility and jurisdiction since the arrest warrants have been released for Israeli leaders as well, and then other major countries, especially like America, saying that this has no jurisdiction. And that's the problem, is if America says they have jurisdiction when it's Putin, they don't have jurisdiction when it's Netanyahu, why would other countries then uphold and see to this as well? I think that undermined then the entire thing. Do I think that all of these leaders, including past leaders of the US, should upfront a court there on at least a warrant and suspicion of if crimes have been committed? Yes. Will it happen? Probably not. Now, it's worth noting too, Russia, the US, China, India and Israel, they've either signed and not ratified, or neither of the Rome Statute, and they therefore aren't seeing to the jurisdiction of this. So technically, Putin could visit the US and back and that not happen. Is that going to happen? Of course, no. But I think that this had credibility until the ones went out for Israel. And of course, then everyone's saying, well, not everyone, but the US saying, we don't see that having any jurisdiction. I think it dropped out the arse at that point. But why is the relationship for Mongolia, Russia, and China, why are they interested in this? Well, firstly, just geographically, look at this. So this is, of course, Mongolia. Here I've drawn in some borders. And, of course, you have behemoths on either side. You've got China and Russia on either side, and Kazakhstan, Uzbek, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Iran, all of which Russia has a lot of interest in here, and a lot of deals being done or lifting, say, some against Afghanistan, of course, Iran, and trying to expand its influence in Asia, Eurasia, as well as China's trying to gain influence over this area of the world. Massive percentage of the world's population lives right in here, and in a lot of these countries has very fast growing populations that we know China and Russia does not have that, not meeting replacement either. So if you're sitting in Mongolia, you're the president of Mongolia, shit, you're pretty hard done by to say, hey, we want you to arrest the president from here or not do deals with these countries. Fucking hell, look at your borders around here with the amount of bloody power here. So yeah, that is, of course, why there's a lot of interest here too. So let's look back at some of these things too. So this is from July 2024 from the Mongolian president in a statement released from the Kremlin in line with Putin. This is his. There are plans to build a railway line connecting the Russian Far East to the People's Republic of China via eastern Mongolia. This will facilitate the development of trilateral cooperation between Russia, Mongolia, China. We look forward to implementing a gas pipeline project. We are facing severe shortage of energy. Our economy is growing and the dependence for electricity is growing as well. We know Russia, a lot of electricity, a lot of natural resources, and they'll be looking to gain some of that as well. And of course, it increases their control. We joined forces with our Chinese colleagues to build this hydropower plant. The project is progressing rapidly. During our meeting in Beijing, I mentioned that it would be good if a similar project was launched jointly with Russia. Now, we have further, there was a meeting with Minister of Foreign Affairs Sergei Lavrov in China and Mongolia as well. As we can see, a trilateral meeting that seek greater synergy of the Eurasian Economic Union, the STEP Road Program, and the Belt and Road Initiative. So let's have a look at some of these, the STEP Road, the Shanghai, the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization as well. But let's have a look at what is being proposed. Now, this is a few years old, but you can see that the yellow and black is under construction. The red is existing. The proposed railways are these ones here, like the black with like the cross on them. We can see the planned dual gauge, like large track here, and as well planned railways then in blue. And you can see this connection, these major connections between China and Russia connecting to then existing railways through Mongolia itself, as well as a lot of other planned railways in here too. Of course, a massive center hub between Russia and China right center in here. Now, of course, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, of course, founded by countries like India, China, Russia, Kazakhstan. But then we can see then as well where Mongolia sits and why this is incredibly important to their neighbors. And then, of course, we have the STEP Road program. This is part of, or at least running in line, of course, with China's Belt and Road Initiative. So what we can see here, of course, the bluey color, green, I don't know, well, it might be colorblind. This is China, and we can see it running the China-Mongolian Russian economic corridor, feeding way from out the east here through Mongolia, way out to the west through as well. Of course, this is Finland, Sweden, this area up in here. This is the Black Sea. Of course, this is Crimea, Ukraine, right where my cursor is here. And then we can see the new Eurasian Land Bridge Economic Corridor running way through Asia and then through Europe. You can see these other corridors that are all part of this. Now, I put a little X through here because we do know there's some influence on Iran, and Iran has some influence down to the Houthi rebels within Yemen, and you could see why it may be in the interest of these to have some limited or at least increase the expense of shipborne travel through these areas that may be able to come into somewhere like in Pakistan here, come up and use these bridge corridors instead of through here. At least if you increase the price of that, you increase the effect on the environment because you're using more fuel to go down around Africa and back up. It's time, insurance, environmental impact that, of course, these companies then pay for as well. Why there might be some influence on here as well, but this doesn't show is the North Sea route that is being opened up, and China and Russia working on icebreakers to fill that in as well. So this just gives you an idea, maybe more over of some things happening in here. And of course, Mongolia, smack bang in the center of this. Now, I asked why then is the STEP Road Initiative a problem for the West, that China is creating a new trade route that bypass traditional Western controlled routes. As I may have shown you, this could divert trade away from Western markets and decrease their economic influence. Decreased or increased economic influence has an effect then, of course, on your military influence as well, and where your allies might sit. Diplomacy, that China's investment often come with loans smaller, less developed countries struggle to pay. So you have an effect on maybe some sovereignty as well and how you can then control this. This could lead to these countries becoming economically dependent on China, weakening their influence on Western financial institutions like the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, and with a geopolitical shift and influence in Central Asia. China's increased presence in the region could shift the balance of power, reducing Western influence. So as much of this is about increasing their influence, it's twofold. Increase your own influence, but by decreasing Western influence as well, as both China and Russia do see the rise of a multipolar world. That is one of the things they are just putting out there that they want and that they see coming forward. A strategic alliance, by building infrastructure and investing in these countries, China is just strengthening their ties with them, potentially forming new alliances that could counterbalance Western alliances like NATO. So imagine China go to a poor country, they say, we'll build you a full international airport. You're never going to have the money to do that or repay us. Okay then, well, we just want to be able to keep our military planes there. It's great for that country because they get an international airport to the standard of which they could never afford, but they could never afford to pay it back. Therefore, you're going to have that airport or that railway or whatever have some investment and China overarching there as well. Control over resources. Central Asia is rich in natural resources, particularly oil and gas. China could gain greater control of global energy supplies, challenging Western energy security as well, especially moving into the future of these areas. As well, something that is left out, and I don't have a map to show you on this, but that the majority of these countries in Asia do have significantly higher replacement rates than not only Russia and China, but of the West as well. And I think into the future, long term, that is something that's going to become more and more obvious. Anyway, legends, I hope that you have a fantastic day. We have an event tonight, and I waited as long as I could to make this video, hoping that those Syriac maps would be released. Go and follow him. Go and follow any other sources I used here. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.